Hey, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into some really interesting material you shared. Gives us a look inside some recent, moves and announcements from the Department of Defense. And our mission here, for this deep dive is to really cut through the noise, pull out the key details the article highlights, and get a sense of what's actually happening. And importantly, only based on the information right here in front of us, we're going to unpack looks like four main things the source covers. There's this big push for cost savings at DOD, then strengthening the partnership with the VA, something new on supporting military families who homeschool, and finally, a bit on international engagement.
Yeah, and it's probably worth saying right away, understanding these kinds of announcements from a huge department like DOD, it's really important. I mean, their decisions affect so much. Vast resources, millions of people, service members, families, veterans, even international partners. And this material, it gives us some very specific examples of what they've been up to lately.
Okay, great. Let's jump right into that first big one then. Finding efficiency. Tackling waste inside the DOD. The article mentions work they're doing with a team called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, is that right?
That's it, DOG.
And the headline number here, it's pretty eye-catching. DOD announced finding an additional $5 billion in savings just last week.
That's a massive number on its own. And like the source points out, that actually brings the total savings they've found with DOGE's help to over $10 billion now.
Wow.
What really stands out there, I think, is the scale, obviously, but also the pace. They seem to be finding this money, according to the reporting.
So where's it coming from? The material points pretty clearly to one major area, contractors and consultants.
Right.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, he's quoted directly, isn't he, making a pretty sharp point about DOD becoming very much over-reliant on them. He even notes they probably have more contractors than civilian employees. That detail, kind of buried in the article, feels significant.
It really does. That quote kind of nails a core challenge, right? Balancing your own people versus outside help.
Yeah.
And based on how the source frames it, the leadership clearly sees that balance as, out of whack, affecting efficiency, costing too much.
And the source gives a really powerful example of this. Working with DOGE, the Air Force apparently cut its biggest management consulting program. Just gone. And the numbers for this one program, they're kind of staggering based on the article. A line-by-line audit cut $1 billion from the current contract.
$1 billion, just like that.
And then they canceled a planned $3.8 billion extension.
Whoa.
So, add that up. $4.8 billion from one Air Force program.
Okay.
The source does say these savings, along with others, make up that $5 billion total found recently, but still it shows where they're finding huge chunks of money.
Right. And that specific example tells you the kind of spending they're zeroing in on. These big embedded consulting gigs. And the why, as the article says, it links back to the main goal. Shift money from wasteful stuff towards healthcare and mission-related programs for our warfighters and their families.
Right. It gives it a clear purpose.
Exactly. A rationale behind the cuts.
The material also mentions Secretary Hegseth signed 3 new memos last week tied to all this. What were those about? What actions did they direct?
Okay, so according to the source, these memos lay out concrete steps. One is about reducing the number of management consultants and contractors overall. Makes sense.
Okay.
Another reforms how executive assistants are used inside the department.
Interesting detail.
And the third puts restrictions on the Office of the Director of Operational Test and Evaluation. So if you look at it from the source's angle, it's not just finding savings, it's actually changing how the department works to keep those savings going. Structural changes.
Okay, that makes sense. So moving from internal efficiency, the article also talks about work between DOD and the VA last week. Secretary Hegseth met with VA Secretary Douglas Collins. What was the main goal there?
Yeah, the goal was pretty explicit, according to the report. Make the relationship stronger between the two departments. Improve services for military folks and retirees.
Okay.
And a really key focus mentions that whole transition process. When service members leave the military.
Yeah, that's such a critical time. Always hear about challenges there.
Exactly. And the source says the secretary signed a memorandum of understanding, an MOU, between the agencies.
Okay, an MOU. What does it actually do, though? What specifics does the article mention?
Well, digging into the source details, the MOU is meant to build a better working relationship around sharing things, like healthcare resources, buildings, even staff.
Right.
But the really concrete things mentioned, the things you can sort of picture, getting service members enrolled in healthcare before they actually separate.
Oh, that's huge. Early enrollment.
Yeah. and also increasing the availability of mental health treatment. Seems like a direct response to known needs.
The article includes this quote from Secretary Hegseth. It felt pretty candid. He acknowledges the agencies haven't always worked well together, talks about a historical disconnect, saying that made it hard for some veterans to get the benefits they earned. That felt like a big admission.
It did feel significant, and based on how the source frames it, admitting that past problem sort of sets the stage for this new push, the stated goal being full cooperation.
Right.
So for you, the listener, if you're a service member or a vet, the message the source seems to want to convey is DOD and VA are aiming to work together much more closely so that your transition to civilian life happens properly, carefully, thoughtfully. That's the quote.
Okay, good. Let's shift to the third area the source touched on, military families and homeschooling.
Right. Another interesting piece from last week's activities. The department, it seems, formally recognized how important homeschooling is for military families.
Which makes sense given how much they move.
Exactly. And they announced a comprehensive review of the support they currently offer.
A comprehensive review. Okay, the source mentioned a specific memo, right? May 27th.
That's the one. It directs the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness to kick off this big department-wide look.
And what's the review actually looking at, according to the memo details in the source?
It's going to examine how the military supports these families right now. Look for best practices. Maybe one branch does it better than another, And also explore if DOD can provide things like facilities or access to other resources, specifically for homeschooled kids and military families.
Secretary Hegseth is quoted again, saying the purpose is upholding the commitment to improve the education, well-being, and future success of military-connected students. And it emphasizes supporting parents' choices. That quote really links it directly to the kids' success and respecting the parents.
Absolutely. And the article connects that back to the department's own interests, too. It says that ensuring strong educational support, whatever form it takes, is seen as maintaining morale and readiness.
Ah, okay.
So supporting families, supporting homeschooling choices, it's positioned as vital for the military's overall effectiveness, keeping the force stable.
Got it. Okay, one last area from the source material. International engagement. Secretary Hegseth traveled to Singapore May 29th for the Shangri-La Dialogue.
Right. That's a major security conference for the Indo-Pacific region. So him being there, as the article notes, is pretty significant.
What was the main message he delivered there, according to the article?
He laid out President Trump's approach for U.S. policy in the region, described it as a common-sense peace-through-strength approach.
Okay.
The source actually calls his address historic.
Historic, okay. And what specifics did he share about U.S. priorities and relationships there?
Well, the source says he stressed that the Indo-Pacific is America's top priority theater, priority one, and that the U.S. is sticking by its allies and partners. Mentioned treaty allies, key defense partners, ASEAN nations. But there was a key point about partnerships. He's quoted saying partnerships mean every nation chipping in for security against threats.
Okay. That point about allies and partners needing to do their part on defense, the source said this might involve uncomfortable and tough conversations.
Yeah.
Because, quoting him again, partners owe it to each other to be honest and to be realistic.
Right. So that aspect of the peace through strength idea, at least as the source presents it here, seems to involve very clear expectations, direct talk, even if it's difficult. It's not just about, military hardware, but the actual dynamics within the alliances, the give and take.
And the article wraps that section saying he left partners with a commitment to partnership, but stressed that loyalty requires each side to, quote, do its part and seize the benefit.
A very transactional element there, it seems.
So, okay, let's pull back for a second. We've covered quite a bit, all from this source material you shared. We saw DOD finding billions in savings, really focusing on contractors and consultants.
Right, that DOGE effort.
Then strengthening that critical transition piece for service members with the VA, taking some concrete steps with that MOU.
Improving healthcare access, mental health support.
Then kicking off this big review of support for military families who homeschool, recognizing that need.
And linking it to morale and readiness.
And finally, reaffirming the U.S. strategy and, importantly, partner expectations in the Indo-Pacific at Shangri-La.
Yeah, what this collection of info highlights, just drawn from the article itself, is really a snapshot of a department juggling a lot of complex things at once. Tackling internal structures, investing in people, troops, families, vets, and also managing major international relationships, all seemingly happening concurrently.
It definitely gives you, the listener, a window into some key priorities and actions right now, based strictly on the material we looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. How do these different efforts, all described here in the source, potentially connect or maybe even compete? You've got this drive for internal efficiency, cutting costs.
The contractor focus.
Right. Then you have investment in people, the VA help, the family support, homeschooling.
Things that cost money.
Exactly. And then there's the big strategic engagement overseas, the peace through strength posture. How does a massive organization like DOD balance that internal push for savings with the need to invest in its people and project strength globally? Do they reinforce each other or create new tensions? Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Hope this helps you feel well informed on these topics.